What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and the New York Giants are getting closer and closer to the start of the 2023 NFL Draft, and we've talked a lot all offseason long about the many different possibilities that are present for the Giants this offseason. We've talked about trading down in the draft. We've talked about who they could take with the 25th overall pick, but today we want to talk about the reason why they might want to trade up instead. Now, if you're taking a look at this draft class and you're looking at what all of the analysts are saying, they don't think there's a lot of first-round talents in this year's class. Most analysts are saying that it's a thin class. There's not a lot of top-end talent, and so the Giants kind of sitting here at the back end of the first round. Would it be wise for them to trade down, acquire more draft capital? Would it be wise for them to stick and pick? Or would it be wise to move up and get one of those first-round talents, one of those prospects that can make an impact in year one and has a first-round grade attached to them? So that's kind of what we want to dive into today, discuss why there's pros, maybe some cons to trading up, and why it's really a viable option for the New York Giants this year, probably more viable than it has been in years past. Keep in mind the 25th overall pick in the draft, the team who held that pick has traded out of it in each of the last 6 NFL drafts, which is such an interesting statistic to me. So the Giants, sitting at 25 overall, they are statistically the most likely team to trade out of their pick, and it'll be really interesting to see if they do that, if they trade down, or, as we're going to discuss today, if they trade up. So we're going to go ahead and dive into the possibility of trading up, but before we do, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. So without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, and what are your thoughts on the Giants potentially trading up in the first round of the NFL Draft?
I'm doing great, fellas. It is Friday. We are getting excited for the weekend and the NFL Draft coming up in just about a week. I got my bachelor party tomorrow, which should be interesting to say the least. Going to be lots of alcohol consumed, lots of fun, and definitely going to be memorable or not memorable, depending on how much I consume. So it's definitely going to be exciting. But yeah, we got the draft in a week. Obviously, things are ramping up here. And the interesting thing that we keep hearing, this is kind of just starting to come out right now, at least the last couple of days here, that there's not a lot of first-round grades in this draft class. This draft class is weak, and it makes the importance of having high-end talent evaluators and really good scouts essential. And the Giants overhauled their scouting department, overhauled their primary decision makers this past offseason, going out and getting guys like Brandon Brown from the Philadelphia Eagles. And of course, you have Brian Dable and Joe Shane, some of the best talent evaluators in the game. And finally, we're in a spot that, you have a weaker draft class. This is where those draft, scouts and talent evaluators really shine through. That's where they got to put their best foot forward. And the Giants have those type of guys in the room. So I'm very ecstatic about that. I'm very excited to see who they select. But with that being said, there are not that many first round graded players in this draft class. So if you're the Giants, you look at the 25th overall pick. In the last 6 years combined, each of the past 6 years, that 25th pick has been traded away, whether it's moving up, whether it's moving down. There have been guys that, teams are obviously looking for and are trying to either gain more draft capital or give up some of that capital to find a player of the magnitude they're looking for. So the Giants, specifically with the 25th overall pick, you look at this draft class saying, okay, well, there's a lot of players in this draft class in this first round specifically that have second round grades. So if you're the Giants, are you more willing to move up in the draft to try and get yourself a guy with a first round grade? Or are you more intrigued by the concept of trading back, getting more capital and adding more talent in the later to mid rounds, where you may not be able to find all of those, stud pieces you may have found in the past because of this draft class is kind of weak. Maybe there's a lot more mid-round talents than there are first-round talents, but Anthony, when you're looking at this draft class, thinking about where the Giants can get the most value, finding a player with a first-round grade probably is ideal. It definitely is ideal, so moving up a couple spots to find someone like that can impact your team instantly, it could be the most beneficial move. What are your thoughts about that and Joe Shane's comments yesterday, essentially saying that they have the draft capital to move up if they want to?
Yeah, listen, he was asked about having 10 total picks in this upcoming 2023 NFL Draft. I mean, they had 11. They traded one of those away to acquire Darren Waller, so they got a nice veteran, potential superstar in a trade with some of this draft capital. And so when Joe Shane was asked about it, he mentioned, yeah, we can use those picks to do a lot of different things. We can stick and pick with all of them, have 10 chances of getting someone good in the draft, right? Or we could trade it for a veteran player, kind of indicating that the Giants maybe aren't done looking for instant impact starters, which also might indicate that they want to move up and get an instant impact starter on a rookie contract in the first round of this year's draft. But I do think it's worth noting, we've heard there's been a lot of rumors swirling around about the Giants maybe being interested in the veteran wide receiver market. We know that they were sniffing around trying to see if Jerry Jeudy was available. Brandon Ayuk is a name that's been linked to the Giants many times. And of course, DeAndre Hopkins, who's still out there for the taking and definitely for a cheaper kind of mid-round pick. The Giants have so many picks, they can get a deal done for one of these guys if they want to, but they could also move up and get a top NFL draft prospect. And that's kind of what I want to hit on right now, is the fact that what you've said here about there not being a lot of day one grades being handed out, I mean, that keeps ringing true. We keep seeing Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl saying that there's not a lot of talents who are real first round prospects, and that the NFL media is way higher on this wide receiver class than NFL executives. He was saying that NFL executives don't really view there as being more than maybe 1 to 2 first round wide receivers in this class. Meanwhile, 4 or 5 are being graded as first round prospects by the media. And of course, 4 or 5 are being projected as first round picks in mock drafts. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the wide receiver spot in particular and how high the Giants are on some of these players, because it doesn't feel to me like the Giants would be the team to kind of reach on a prospect like that, draft for need in such a way. So if we're taking what Jim Nagy was saying, like the Bible, right? And we were saying that, there's only one wide receiver in this class that is a first round grade. Do we really expect the Giants to just reach and take a second round wide receiver with the 25th overall pick? It doesn't seem like Joe Shane's MO. It doesn't seem like something that he would do. But the Giants are clearly interested in the wide receivers in this class. They want to get a wide receiver. So maybe he will say, let's go get the first round wide receiver. Let's trade up. And I think that would be something that's really exciting. Having 10 picks gives you so much flexibility, so much freedom to move up and make the moves that you want to make here. So if the Giants are looking at whether it's Jackson Smith and Jigba as the top wide receiver in the class, that seems to be where they're leaning. If you look at all of the rumors and how heavily they've been scouting him, they could absolutely take a couple of those mid-round picks, move up 10 spots, and boom, there's your WR1 for the Giants offense. And I think that's kind of the flexibility that we haven't had in the past. The Giants have been very cap-strapped in recent years. In some seasons, they haven't really had much draft capital. But right now, Joe Shane did a great job this past year stockpiling on picks, 10 in total now. And they really do have the opportunity here to bolster their roster. So I think when you look at it, though, with all of the first-round grades, not many of them, if you take a look at Pro Football Focus, Trevor Sikkema, he's their lead draft guy. He only has 25 first-round grades this year. And a lot of these prospects, Alex, that we've been talking about, Jordan Addison, Emmanuel Forbes, BJ Ojolari, Quentin Johnston, he has all of these guys listed as round 2 grades, day 2 players. It's so interesting to see kind of the difference between the NFL media and the NFL executives and where these prospects all land in terms of first or second round grades. But Alex, what do you think about moving up to get that wide receiver in particular, right? Because we heard what Jim Nagy said, and he said that a lot of these teams only have 1 first-round grade for any of these wide receivers in this class. We know that the Giants are really interested in a wide receiver. We're interested in a bunch of these guys, Jordan Addison and others, but NFL teams seem to have these guys as second-round picks. Would you be willing to just take one of those players? If you're Joe Shane here, and you've got Jordan Addison with a second-round grade, and he's on the clock at 25, right? Or you think he will be. Are you going to take that pick, or do you think that you should move up and get your first-round wide receiver? How aggressive do you think that the Giants should be to gain the top player at the wide receiver position in this draft?
It's tough because, like you said, I heard someone say that the receivers are more complementary than primary targets. And if the Giants are not convinced that these guys are going to be primary targets, you don't move up to get them. You wait for the one that's highest on your board to land at you. But if you see them as a wide receiver 1, if you see them as a high target share type of guy, you make the move to go and get them, right? There's going to be some interesting situations where I think some of these receivers are going to drop late in the first round. I think that, they're saying Jordan Addison could drop. Quentin Johnston, a lot of people really like him. He's got some really good attributes. I wonder where he goes. He's a physical specimen. I think that he might go higher than people think. But like JSN, like who knows where in Jigba, who knows where he's gonna land? He may go high as well. Zay Flowers, a lot of people are mocking him to the Chargers, which would be an interesting landing spot for him. Could go right before the Giants to the Chargers. That's definitely an opportunity for them. But it's going to be weird. Like, I just can't really put a pulse on it. I can't really put my finger on the pulse and say, I know where these receivers are going to go. If you're the Giants, I don't think you make premature decisions. I think you let the draft come to you. And, you made an interesting point. If there's no receivers in this draft class that really stand out as top guns, maybe you do end up trading the 25th overall pick for a receiver that's already established in the NFL that has that wide receiver one quality. Maybe we do see a Brandon Ayuk target. Maybe we do see Jerry Jeudy. They end up caving for him because, like, you know what? The receivers that we want here just aren't here. The draft, like, nobody wants to trade back with us. The other players aren't, the grades aren't great. We don't necessarily like them. Let's go and trade this pick for someone that actually can make an impact now. That's a quality player, even if that means you have to sacrifice a year or two of the rookie contract. There is an opportunity where the Giants could do that, and I think that I'd understand it. Now, with that being said, the Giants could land a couple of second-round graded players if they want to trade back. If they find an opportunity with a team like Seattle, for example, to move back to 37, as we talked about a couple days ago, you get a little bit more draft capital. You get a guy that's still a second-round draft value because at 25, it's possible that most of the first-round draft picks, graded players, are gone. So you're really just going highest player on your board, BPA. But if you have similarly graded players, let's say the Giants are at 25, and there's 5 players on their board that they have very similarly graded, you trade back. You look for a trade back partner, and then you take the best one available, a couple spots behind. Because, ultimately, the drop-off in talent's not that much. After 15, I think, there's a monster drop-off in talent. So you have to kind of consider the fact that you're going to be forfeiting a lot of value. If you do draft at 25, I think it's really suiting up to offer the idea that moving from the 25th pick either direction makes a lot of sense. You can justify moving up from 25 to get a first-round graded player, but you also justify moving back because there aren't any first-round graded players. It really depends on how many first-round grades they have in this draft class to begin with. We just don't know. It could be 25. It could be 15 for all we know. So they could be thinking, we got to move. We got to get out of this pick. But with that being said, it doesn't only have to be the first round. You can look in the mid rounds, the third and fourth rounds, as opportunities for the Giants to say, hey, why don't we trade up and move up for a guy that we're high on in the mid rounds? There could be a lot more depth in this draft class in those middle rounds than there is in the top of the draft. So, we've seen the Giants do this in the past, like you mentioned with Azeez Ojulari. They move up and get him, or what they did with Aaron Robinson in the third round. The Eagles really wanted him, and they leapfrogged the Eagles and grab Aaron Robinson. Of course, didn't really pan out, but more so because of injuries. I think that there's more so opportunities to move around in the mid rounds than I would be looking to trade up. In my preference, I think I'd rather move back in the first round and then move up in the middle rounds and use the draft capital that we acquire from trading back to move up and get a couple players that we're higher on in the third round. You know what I mean? I think that might be my more favorable strategy. What would you prefer to do? Move up or move back from 25?
Honestly, at this point, I think I'd prefer to move up. Now, I totally see the benefits of moving back. You add more of those depth pieces in those middle rounds. You get more darts to throw at the board. I like that mindset. That always works out for teams. But right now, I think where the Giants are at, and this is kind of what I wanted to get into and ask you next, Alex, is the Giants need an instant impact player, don't they? They're not necessarily rebuilding anymore. This is a team that's only a few pieces away, a few steps away from making a deep playoff run. They made it to the divisional round this past season. I don't think that they're in a position to kind of sit around and wait for some guys to develop from those middle round picks. I think that they do need to go out there and get somebody who can start day one, make an impact. And in my opinion, the only way that they're really going to have the opportunity to do that is if they trade up in the first round of this draft. Then they'll be able to get an instant impact player. Or if they trade those mid round picks or some sort of pick to get an established veteran in the NFL. Listen, sometimes that's kind of how you have to look at it. You're using these draft picks to draft a veteran player. In some ways, that could be the case. The Giants might want to go ahead and consider doing something like that. Get a veteran wide receiver who makes an instant impact. But if you're looking for a rookie who's going to have an impact from day one, the Giants are going to need to trade up. I think just to add more context to this and really make it more eye-opening how weak this draft class is, apparently Chris Ballard, general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, he said that the team only has 17 players on their draft board with first-round grades. Just 17. The Giants are picking at 25 guys. There's 31 picks in this year's NFL first round of the draft, right? And only 17 of those players, according to the Colts GM, are first-round graded players. That's not very good. It's a weak draft class right now, and if you're looking at all around the league, even Brandon Beane, Buffalo Bills general manager, this one might be more eye-opening to you guys, because if you're thinking, what's Joe Shane's mindset on this draft class? Where's his head at on this? Well, Brandon Beane, the guy who kind of mentored him and got him into the position to be the Giants general manager, he said that he won't comment right now specifically on how many first round grades the team has, but says, quote, "It's not great," end quote. That's Buffalo Bills general manager Brandon Beane. So if you are sitting in the 25th overall pick, if you're the New York Giants and you want a guy who can make an impact on day one, I think with a weak draft class like this, you sacrifice some of those mid-round picks. You forego the opportunity to take some of those mid-round picks. You move up in the draft and you go ahead and get that player that you think can be a bona fide superstar. You get that instant impact player, a first-round graded player. So that's where my mindset is at, Alex. I know we've talked about moving down. We've talked about the pros and the cons of trading down. There's definitely a lot of players with round 2 grades maybe that we think could be really, really solid for the team. But I think that the Giants kind of need to walk away from this draft with a round 1 graded player in my eyes. Again, making it to the divisional round, having such a huge developmental step in year 1 of Brian Dable's tenure as head coach. All of these players just took this big step forward, and I feel like they're ready to take a second big step in year 2 with Brian Dable. But they do need more pieces on this roster, and they need more pieces that can make an impact immediately. So I guess, what is your mindset on that? How do you feel about the hearing Brandon Beane, Chris Ballard kind of crap all over this draft class, call it a really weak class? And do you think that that's more motivation in your eyes for the Giants to move up? And do you feel like they need to get that instant impact player in round 1?
I mean, look, ultimately, I think that you can get first-round picks that aren't instant impact players. You know what I mean? Like, how many times do we see every year players like Clennon Farrell or whatever it might be just dud? Like, they just bust. Like, how many guys just don't end up being good? Just because you have a first-round grade doesn't mean you're going to pan out. And I think that's what we have to remember here. Sometimes players make it to the NFL and they just kick it into another gear. Sometimes you just can't tell. Right now, if I were the Giants, I'd be going up with a guy that has as much mental upside as physical upside, because sometimes it's about work ethic. Sometimes it's about wanting to be the best. Sometimes it's about culture fit. And I think those variables go under the radar sometimes. So I'd be going after a guy that's like wants to get to the NFL and just work, but they have the physical tools to be great. I could totally see them going after like Brian Branch from Alabama and saying, you know what? He's going to be our strong safety, and he's a really good one at that. We're going to have a really good secondary with, some great pieces there, some great young pieces that come from NFL caliber collegiate teams like Alabama, Georgia, whatever it might be. So I'd say that I personally feel as though right now the Giants are in a good spot because they have the luxury of moving around. They can go up, they can go down. But I don't necessarily think just because you have a first round grade, I think that's kind of overblown. I think just because you have a first round grade doesn't mean you're going to be a good player. Doesn't mean you're going to be a star. Maybe you have better fundamentals. Maybe you have better stats. Maybe you have better this or better that, better athletic scores. Like, there's so many things that go into building a first round grade, but that does not guarantee success. You know what I mean? So like trading up and giving up substantial draft capital to take what is a risk, because every draft pick is a risk, is a bit concerning to me. Not maybe concerning is not the right word, but risky to me. It's certainly something that I'd be okay with depending on the player, but there are specific guys I'd love to have. If they're, if you're just moving up to move up, not a great idea. But if you have a specific player in mind that really fits the style you're looking for, really is just the best player that's on the board, is available, you think you can leapfrog and grab, I could get on board with that. Like, I would love for the Giants to land Joey Porter out of Penn State. Love him as a prospect. He'd be a sick alpha dog, future CB1. He realistically would probably be our future CB1 post Adoree Jackson. At least that would be the hope. That'd be the hope of his role developing into that. Joey Porter, would love it. That'd be awesome. Brian Branch, great strong safety. Another guy you could bring into the mix to help complement Xavier McKinney. So when you're looking at the players, there's specific guys. I'm not drafting a center in the first round. That's been my take the whole time. I'm not on board with drafting a center. I don't like the whole concept behind it. I'd rather go after a center in the second round. I'm not drafting a linebacker in the first round. Trenton Simpson, love the guy. He's the only one that probably is even sniffing a first round grade. I think he has a second round grade though, probably by most accounts. So right now I kind of feel as though you go with the top players. You gotta see how the board unfolds. Really, it's gonna be weird. It's gonna be random. How many times we see the Raiders take a guy that everyone's like, wait, what the hell are you doing? Alex Leatherwood, remember that pick? What are you doing, man? What are you doing? Why do you? This is a third round player going to the first. You know what I mean? How many times do the Patriots go out and get like a backup guard in the first round? Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? We see this happen every year. Teams take random shots in the dark, playing Russian roulette. Sometimes it pans out. A lot of times it doesn't. But teams do whatever they want to do, and sometimes it's very random, and the Giants just have to sit pretty, wait for their pick, and make a decision when they're up. They have time, and they'll make those decisions as they come. But I trust our coaching staff, I trust our front office, I trust our talent evaluators, and I know that whoever the Giants do get is going to make an impact early, and they're going to make sure of that because they're going to be a good scheme fit for us.
Yeah, and listen, I have full faith in the Giants front office. I think that Joe Schoen has done a phenomenal job, and I think that he's going to look at every opportunity possible to extract as much value out of this first round as possible. But I just think, all that you're saying here in terms of not seeing round one grades at the linebacker spot, at the safety spot, and I know, listen, first things first, not every pick always pans out. In fact, most picks don't pan out. Most first-round graded players are not actual first-round talents. They don't end up being the instant impact starters. But I feel like if you're the New York Giants and you feel like you're one or two players away from really competing, maybe winning the NFC East, if that's the Giants' mindset here, I think that they need to try and get that number one player, that top player at a position to bolster this team and take the next step in the 2023 season. So, listen, I'm a huge proponent of trading up this year. I'm usually not. I mean, if you guys have been listening to the channel for the last few years, you know that I'm always a proponent of trading down. Like, let's go back, let's gain more draft capital. But I think that's because the Giants have been a really bad team the last few years. They haven't been good. Now, finally, they're good. I think it's time to be a little bit more aggressive. Add to that top-end talent to really shore up this roster and start competing in the NFC right now, because in the past few years, we haven't been able to say that. We haven't been able to say that the Giants are a few players away from really competing. But now we can. And I think that now that that's the case, the Giants should absolutely go ahead, make some moves here to get some top-end talent if they see any on the draft board. So that's my take on it. But I want to hear your take on it down below in the comment section. What do you think the Giants should do? Should they trade up? Should they trade down? Should they stick and pick? Let us know down below. And if you like this episode, please make sure to leave a like and, of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. We will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.